And we are live. Welcome every morning, everybody, and good morning. This is an Artful Life, curious conversations about the way humans make and use art. And I want to welcome Melissa Heffelin, my co-host and an artist, and especially want to welcome Nandini Makrandi. Makrandi, did I say that right?
Pretty
Makrandi
close.
on the third try. Chief Curator at the Hunter Museum of American Art. And today we will be talking about curation. So I'm super excited for our conversation. Welcome, everybody. And Nandini, why don't you just quickly give us a 1 minute, 2 minute version of your bio so we kind of know who we're dealing with today.
Hi, Nina, and hi, Melissa. So good to see you guys, and thank you for having me on An Artful Life. So I'm the head curator here at the Hunter Museum, which is a museum of American art, kind of 1700s to today. And I work primarily with the contemporary portion of the collection, although I do oversee the whole practice here. But I've been here. This is going to be my 20th year at the Hunter, so I've been here for a long time and seen a lot of changes, including the addition of our newest wing, which is now 20 years old, built in 2005. And I don't know, I've really loved being here and kind of helping shepherd the institution into the 21st century in a number of different ways.
Excellent.
That is a legacy. It must be really fulfilling to have continuity like that.
Yeah.
It is. It's lovely to look around a gallery and know how each object got there and the stories behind it and who we worked with and why it's there. It starts to feel like home. So.
Yeah.
We want to start our conversation with a question about what a curator does. What's the difference between the work of a curator and the work of a museum director, for example? I don't think all that many people understand the difference.
Right. Well, it varies, obviously, according to every institution is a little bit different. Most curators, what I do is I look at the permanent collection of the institution and see what it needs. And since we're an American art museum, as I mentioned, it would be how we define American, what artists should be part of that legacy, and you oversee collections care. You do a lot of research and writing to make your decisions. And also the exhibition program, which has to tie back, in our case, to our collection. What a museum director does, so that's all art oriented for me. And for a curator in a science museum, it would be, particular to their field. The director is more of an overseer of the whole institution. And most directors' primary function, besides hopefully supporting their staff, is to fundraise for all those initiatives that the staff dreams up. So I am collecting and exhibiting art and hopefully educating our guests about it, whether it's local or national or online. The director is making the money, so I can do that in a nutshell.
When you say you do a lot of writing, what I can think of, you would be writing the information cards for the pieces on the wall, maybe writing catalogs. What other is that it, or is there other kinds of writing that are required by a curator?
Because there's so much research as you get to know an object or an artist, there's note taking, and then you type it up into some kind of format, and then it gets utilized by your communication staff, by the fundraisers. Yes, you absolutely see interpretive text next to objects when they're on display. You see text panels. It may get utilized for education, for docents, for tours. Grant writing is a huge part of today's curatorial task list because we all need those funds. And sometimes we're lucky enough to also write essays that go into catalogs. A museum like ours, which is small staffed, you don't get a lot of options or time to do serious writing, scholarly writing. But sometimes that's what certain curators do. That's all they do.
And then moving away from paper, I think a lot of your job is deciding how the pieces are shown in a gallery, like organizing the look of the exhibition. Is that so?
Yeah. So, what do you think most people think when they walk in and they say, or the word curator is so used in the mainstream, right? It's a curated collection of fashion at Target, or it's a curated lunch. And obviously, that's not the same thing as what we're doing.
No.
You know, when we curate something in a gallery, for example, you choose a number of artworks and you have to look at how they relate to each other, whether it's the time period, the artist, the movements, the style, uh, the subject matter, the colors, all of those things. And then that how you contextualize all that is curation, how you explain how it fits
Oh,
into the stream of art history, into everyday um, issues, especially for a contemporary curator like myself. It's really important to engage people with issues today. And older work can speak to that as well, because obviously artists don't exist in a vacuum. And even somebody painting in the 1700s was addressing something that was important to them. So that's what curation is, in my view, is how you make those objects relevant to each other and then to the person walking in and looking around the room. We say that every one of our galleries has a big idea. And when you walk in, I hope you can kind of sense what that big idea is. So,
Which sort of also brings you to the question of how does the hanging, and you're actually starting to talk about that, of a show influence how it's being experienced?
yeah, so Melissa just came and saw an exhibit here on Art Deco glass, and she can speak to how her experience was. But for the show before that was, just so you know how we relate to a lot of different audiences. Art Deco glass, we were doing it in the summer because we have a high tourist season. We thought it would be something really lovely and beautiful to appeal to a larger market, a larger group of people and audience. And the exhibit before this was all new media art, so video based, algorithmic, those kinds of pieces.
Mhm.
For that exhibit, the gallery was dark, the screens were the light, um, the walls were white. You know, it looked a little rough and warehousey, perhaps.
Mhm.
And this exhibit is completely different. The walls are painted these rich, deep colors. Lots of new caseworks, a lot of Art Deco vinyl to kind of bring you into the space and make you feel like you're in a little bit different time. I mean, we don't go all out with like brocade furnishings or anything, but yeah, just to hint at it.
Mhm.
So the design of the space, how it influences what you think when you walk in, is also part of what we do for sure.
Mhm.
So.
So you were talking about, curating also for the seasons and tourists, etc. So
Mhm.
how does that work for your permanent collection? Because I don't know, how much rotation do you have in there, and how often do you rotate that in and out? Like what are the decisions around that?
So the permanent collection is a different kind of situation. The Hunter, and it again varies by institutional size and staff, but the Hunter has 22 permanent collection galleries.
Wow.
So the special exhibits change every 3 months. And so we're very exhibition driven institution. Most museums are these days.
Mhm.
But our collection, which is on view, every gallery has some rotation every year. So it's not necessarily entirely re-envisioned, but something changes, whether it's putting a new piece in, changing interpretation, new juxtapositions. We have 3,400 objects, and probably 10% are on view. So, you want to get things out as much as possible. So, those are not seasonal so much as the temporary exhibition calendar. Really, you have to think about September to May being the school year, where K through 12 colleges are in. So you want to have exhibitions that they can work from as well.
Okay,
Oh,
so
that's
that's
an interesting component, the educational interaction.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we try. Sometimes an exhibit may be only doable at a particular time, but yeah.
I enjoyed, I remember I come and go. I live part of the year in Chattanooga. And so I get to drop in and see things change. And I remember when in the mansion part, which typically had early American art, it was, you began introducing by subject matter more contemporary pieces to compare with, mixing up centuries even by subject matter. And I found that really intriguing.
What made you, what did that do for you? What made it intriguing?
Well, I don't love early American art, and so I tend to not look very attentively at it. And the suggestion to compare had me stop and be a lot more thoughtful about my relationship to the older art and less reactive, and it made me spend more time there.
Okay, so it worked.
It
I guess.
worked.
It worked. And that's exactly what we're trying to do is, have more people go into the mansion. Just physically, the way this institution works, the Hunter is although all three buildings are connected, the mansion is to the side, and people often just walk by without going into to that building. And so having something contemporary, bright, colorful, different in the hallway that leads up makes people go in, and then they encounter video and modern photography or sculpture in those galleries, just a few pieces, half a dozen, but they help flesh out the story. For example, in our early American portrait gallery, which is focused on sitters from the late 1700s, early 1800s. We don't really know who they are. They're examples of early American portraiture. But one thing you can see just looking around the room is that they're all European American, right? They're all white Caucasian faces. There's nobody else. And obviously other people lived in the country at that time. And so what we've started doing is bringing in artwork by contemporary African American artists. And so you see representation of someone from today, but you are addressing the obvious need for having it then, and the situation that was in the colonies and early America that didn't allow for that representation. So it gives education a chance to delve into a difficult subject, which is enslavement, and then but do it through art in a more subtle way, I suppose. And it makes, like you said, Melissa, it makes people take notice. So
It really stops you because your first thought is, why are these together? And then you sort of unravel it.
Right. Yeah. I was thinking maybe we need to do it the opposite way too, is bring some historic pieces
Wow.
into the contemporary gallery. I don't know. We haven't tried that yet.
We were just talking last night. Melissa and I are actually in the same apartment, just in two different rooms. We were talking about the Barnes collection last night, where, that was sort of, part of the allure of it is that they just hodgepodged everything together by non-traditional criteria. So it was like, a room full of images where everything had green in it or everything had a person with, a cane in their hand or whatever. It was very untraditional. And I sort of love that approach because it just gives you a fresh context of how you're looking at art in general. And then of course there's the corrective, sort of correcting history bit part that you just were talking to, which I also think, Melissa, brings us to our question that we both are very excited about. Question number 4. You want to ask it?
Go for it. You dig in.
Well, no, I think you should dig in because it's really your question and it's your thing. So go for it. Sorry.
Number 4. My goodness.
Number 4. You don't have a number 4. We have a number 4.
Oh, we have a number 4. Okay.
Yeah.
You and I have talked about this many times, and it's become a little bit of a pet project for me, which is the absence of women and minorities from the major collections in our country and all over European civilization, in fact. And so I wondered if you'd talk a little bit about the job of a curator when facing this void, because it's a gasping void in our culture. And the presence in a museum is a kind of cultural blessing where somebody has decided this is what we deem important about our culture in these examples, and so many people just aren't there. And I wondered about your thoughts and what you think a curator's role is now facing that void.
I mean, I'm old enough to have worked in museums and gone to school when none of these things were really addressed, and I didn't think too much about them. I mean, obviously, it's kind of in the back of your mind as a woman, but it wasn't actively something I thought about. And when the Hunter hired me for their contemporary curator position, all they said is, our last artwork's around the 1990s. This is 2004. Obviously, we need to catch up a little.
A little,
and they were right. It was very forward thinking of them in this small southern town to acknowledge that even that was needed. And so I was lucky enough to have a lot of support. And I, at first, was just looking for artists who were not white men, because they have so much of that in this collection. And as it grew and I kept acquiring things and also doing different kinds of exhibitions, it became very clear that our percentage of women artists was somewhere between 9 and 11%, depending on how you sort the numbers.
Which isn't the lowest percentage that's out there. That's not.
No, it's not. It's actually, dare I say, decent in the American art world, but it's not good, clearly.
Metropolitan is 4.5%.
Where is it, 4.5?
Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Yeah. So, I mean, in fairness, you do have to see how the numbers are sorted. If you're looking at the Met at the thousands upon thousands of ancient objects that they have and putting those in the mix, you don't know who the makers are. And you're probably assuming they're male. I don't know. But and our numbers are thrown off a bit by the fact that we inherited 2 artist estates, which were hundreds and hundreds of works, and they were both male artists. And so our numbers get thrown off a little by those 2 things. But still, we are not where we need to be. So a few years ago, we decided very actively to collect women artists and artists of color. So those are our priority areas. It's said out loud everywhere. It's on the website, I think. It's said at board meetings. It's in the collections plan. And so we very actively try to do that. Now, in the last few years, you will notice that a lot of institutions are doing that. We've been doing it for almost 20 years, since a few years after I started. But like I said, it was an organic, intuitive thing. And now it's something that's a lot more thoughtfully done and carefully done than when I first started. So,
do you have words for, because I'm still formulating my own, so this is genuine curiosity, what is better when there is more balance between the sexes in a museum? What is it that we lose when it isn't?
Well, I think you lose perspective. If everything in a gallery is a painting of a white woman by a white man, obviously you have just one perspective on a woman and only on one type of woman, I assume. And that's what we were all taught, right? Certain kinds of landscapes, certain kind of portraits. This can be a still life, that can't. And so just changing up who's painting, what they're painting, the medium they're using, looking at the same kind of thing through a video versus a traditional watercolor. They're 2 different approaches. They may be the same subject, but the approach itself will shift how you think about it. And when you're trying to attract all of Chattanooga or all of Tennessee or all of our region, which is 1 million plus people, they're not all going to look at art the same way. So you want to represent your community as well. And our community is not one person. So for longevity of the institution, if nothing else, you should try and appeal and look at things in more than one way. And if you're going to be in a Museum of American Art, then represent America. And it's not just one kind of person.
Amen. Beautifully.
Amen to that. Yes, yes.
So,
Very, very true. So, in order to get more balance, how does the decommission process work?
okay, we call it deaccessioning. You mean when you don't have something in a museum collection anymore?
Mhm.
Of it.
Yeah.
So we don't automatically deaccession men to make room for women.
You do not?
That's the thing about working in an institution versus a home where your husband or spouse or whatever says, okay, the home is full. You have to get rid of something if you want to buy another cup. Some of your bowls have to go or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not that way. Deaccessioning is for us, accessioning when we take our work into the institution is a legal process. So you were saying as an institution that you are going to take care of it for perpetuity. So that's forever.
Mhm.
You have to be careful because obviously you don't have endless amounts of storage or exhibition space. So deaccessioning is also serious. We have deaccessioned, for example, in the last few years, Asian art objects because we're not an Asian art museum. And these came into the museum before they decided to be an American art museum in the 80s. The hunter's 71, 72 years old. So this is very old stuff. But they're beautiful items. They went to the board for approval and they went to auction so that everybody who was interested could bid in the same playing ground. It was even, And then any money that was made from that auction, from those auctions of the Asian art, went back into the collection so we can buy things that are more appropriate. And what we've tried to do is buy Asian American artists working today, for example.
Lovely. What a nice trade-off.
Yeah. So we're currently deaccessioning a few European pieces. We have some random Dutch things, some possible Renaissance or medieval little tiny things that are sitting here. And then we're going to have to do things that are really badly damaged, that cannot be fixed, that don't have the money to fix, or just aren't in really poor condition. So at no point have we even looked at just the bulk of the collection and said, oh, it has to go. Now, some institutions do that. They do.
I wondered about that. Like, if you buy something that's really fresh and this is going to lead to my next question, but if something was sort of acquired and it was fashionable and important at the time, but turned out to be a misjudgment in some way, and I don't know what the criteria would be for it being a misjudgment, but it sounds like you don't do a lot of that your deacquisitioning is very different.
I mean, I will say every institution has some misjudgments, right? There can't be just all perfect acquisitions. All institutions, responsible ones, ours included, it goes through several staff people when you decide to do something like that, and a committee and a board. So someone's double checking you on both ends when something comes in and when something leaves. So I'm sure there are things we're acquiring now that 20, 30, 40 years in the future, that curator is going to say, what were they thinking? And it is up to them to make that judgment at that time.
Sure.
Yeah.
And speaking of judgment, I think it was you initiated for the Hunter Museum an invitational every 2 years. And artists are invited and they're chosen. And I wondered if you have an organized way of thinking about what the criteria are for that kind of invitation, or if it's a gut reaction, or if it has to be a little bit of both.
I think all curation's a bit of both. So a bit of research and knowledge and definitely going on your gut. I think art works that way. I'm sure music and film works that way too. Mm-hmm. The invitational was initially every 3 years. It started in 2007. We haven't had one since 2019, I think, 18 or 19. Well, COVID, and for a minute there, I felt like I was done doing it. For the viewers who don't know what the Invitational is, it was we wanted to work with local artists in a different way. We didn't want to do a juried call where you have one work by 50 or 100 artists on display, because all you see is that one work that got juried into an exhibit, and it may be that artist's best work, but it doesn't really represent anything more than that. And it doesn't tell you anything about the artist or their connection to the community or any of those kinds of things. So decided to do something called Invitational, inviting 7 to 10 artists in our region, starting out from Chattanooga and kind of going in a 200-mile radius, 150, 200-mile. Chattanooga is very close to several big cities: Atlanta, Birmingham, Nashville, Charlotte, Knoxville, lots of big cities. So there's lots of artists to draw upon if Chattanooga didn't have them already. Those 7 artists would make a new body of work for this exhibit. And so they would show a large amount of work in that space. So for me, though, it was like curating 7 to 10 solo shows that all had to work together at one time in one space.
Wow.
So it was a lot of logistics. And, I would do 50, 60 studio visits to narrow down my list. And then I'd have to go back 2 or 3 times to each of the people on the list. And so it's very time intensive. But I thought it was a good program for the museum and for the artists. What did you say?
I thought it was amazing.
Well, great. Yeah. So we're thinking of doing one in 26 now. It's back on the calendar.
Yeah, it's amazing opportunity for local artists or regional artists. I mean, wow. Yeah.
And we've acquired work by probably about half of those artists, either from the show or after. So it has been a little bit of a pipeline to the collection as well.
So what does it do for the artists, actually? I mean, does it give them, do you look for artists that don't have a platform yet and this elevates them? Or do you go super established to, emerging? How do you make your choices there?
Yeah, it's a mix of all of that. And I didn't answer that question from earlier about how we choose them. It's so much instinct, Nina. It's looking at what seems right for the moment and what would work with the other artists I'm thinking about. And what speaks to our collection at the time, also how it connects. For any artist, when I'm asked to jury a show or curate something, I am looking for fresh. I mean, you can be the best painter in the world, but if you are doing the same thing that was done 300 years ago and just painting the landscape in front of your door, what are you teaching somebody? And so I need a little bit more. I need to see your life in your work, and then see how it relates to other people. I think the works that stand out for me and that resonate with me are ones that that individual artists can take their personal stories and make them universal in the way they've approached them. So
look at a few of the images that we have at this point.
Yes.
Actually, I did pick some of my favorites for that. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to bring some photos on stage, as it's called here in StreamYard land. So this is actually the museum, since this is the first image that we have. I mean, this is not like your little poo-poo regional museum. This is an amazing, beautiful structure. I mean, I'm just blown away by the architecture.
It's a remarkable museum. And because of the blessings of steel and Coca-Cola and various other industries in our town, we have a beautiful collection.
Yeah,
we do. Yeah. And I will say that this image that I know I sent you, but if people go to huntermuseum.org, they can see the whole campus, which is 3 buildings, and you can see the 1905 mansion, the 70s building, and then this is the wing that was built about 20 years ago. Yeah. And it is a massive building, set of buildings, actually.
So I'm going to show this here, right? That was the
Yes.
first one you wanted to
Mhm.
show. Yeah.
This is Leslie Dill.
This is Leslie Dill, who is originally from Maine, based in Brooklyn, since Melissa's heading up to Maine.
Yeah.
She's not there, but this is one of the first pieces I acquired for the Hunter. Leslie does a lot of female imagery. Her work is very much about women, and she loves Emily Dickinson. And so I don't know if you can zoom in. I don't know what people see, but the text that's on the woman is a poem from Dickinson. And all of Leslie's work kind of expresses the interaction of text and figure, so the text is the voice, right? It's the voice of the person, the unheard voices that may go unanswered. And then in this work, which is kind of a print on tea-stained fabric, there's lots of threads hanging down. The piece itself is probably, I want to say, at least 12 feet tall, believe it or not, on silk. And those threads kind of come down off the figure. And I didn't know this at the time. I just thought it was a really interesting piece, and I couldn't stop staring at it. But she had seen a temple in Nepal, and it had this metal. It was a 3-story temple, and there was a metal, what was described to her as the tongue of God, coming down, and you would whisper your prayers, dreams, thoughts to the tongue, and it would take them to the heavens. And so this was the inspiration for this piece, which I think is lovely. I mean, you don't need to know that, but that really spoke to me as well.
I also have a beautiful photograph by Lala Sadie with a woman with writing on them. It would be really fun to hang those together.
We have hung them together. In fact, you can't see the gallery installation shot where that Dill piece was a minute ago, but on the opposite side of it was Lala's work, actually. So yes, you were.
And another Leslie Dill.
Yeah, so this is a piece. So that first piece we saw, we purchased, like I said, it was one of my first purchases. I did get some flack for it because people thought, what is she buying? But I have always connected very emotionally with Leslie's work. And that one purchase led to us doing a traveling exhibition of her work, which was the first traveling exhibition the Hunter did in 2009 to about 2012. It traveled the country. And this piece was part of that, and now we own it. And to give you a sense of scale, this is about 50 to 60 feet across and comes into the gallery about 10 feet. And that figure that's sitting on the chair, which is supposed to be like a female Buddha, is life-size to Leslie. So it's about 5 feet sitting. And then the banners are visions and dreams of people that she collected in North Carolina in a residency, where she collected 700 visions that people told her they'd had. And she embroidered some of the words from the repeated ones. So they say things like, I heard a voice, time stood still, I'm on fire, like all kinds of things.
I was flying.
What did you say?
I dreamed I was flying.
Maybe. But I mean, this piece has such an impact in person. It's huge. It envelops you.
I saw it at Smith College.
During the traveling show. Yeah. That's our alma mater. So she wanted it to go there. And I will say, like, again, you have that mix of figure and text, and something coming out of the figure going to the ceiling. It's that same idea in a very different way. And so this is what I mean by kind of changing up perspective and medium. You're still a portrait. They're both portraits at the end of the day, but they're very different approaches.
Let's talk about the Sanford Biggers now.
Okay, that's the black one.
This one here?
Yes.
So,
yeah, this is a very new acquisition for us, and that's a great image of it.
And I think there's a beautiful connection of something coming off of a figure and getting bigger and telling a story.
Yeah.
So Sanford Biggers is an African-American artist, And this is a fairly new acquisition for us. And this piece is made of sequins, the sequins that flip and you can change direction. Sometimes you can buy cushions with words on them and things like that with different colored sequins. So the thing is black sequins, and the top has been flipped to form the faces. And what it is, if you go to the long shot, is you have 3 African wooden figures casting the shadow that turn into these 3, some of the first female Black Panthers that were part of the Black Panther movement. So I just think, it's so compelling. You don't have to know that it's women. You don't have to know who they are, but you definitely understand the connection back to a different continent where people were brought here, and then they had to survive and then chose to fight through this group. And although the work is by a male artist, it is commemorating women who moved the Black Panther Party forward. So, and the scale of this one also, I believe that wall is maybe 15 feet, so it's taller than that, and it's quite the piece in person.
Yeah, it is, especially when
you get a sense of it when you zoom out. Yeah.
And it also is shiny in person, so it glimmers, which is.
And I watched children react to it because kids love sparkly stuff so much.
I love sparkly stuff.
I was just going to say, kids, I like sparkles.
So,
and then you have Rose. Yes.
Yeah, this is another new acquisition. Rose Simpson, who's an indigenous artist from Santa Clara Pueblo in the Southwest. And this is a life-size, bigger than life piece. This is almost 7 feet tall, I think.
Oh, wow.
And she hand builds these. These are not thrown pieces, so she builds them in bits and pieces. And in person, you can see fingerprints and that sort of thing. She is not trying to idealize the texture of clay in any way. And it is kind of bisque fired and then painted. And there's more on the back, but basically the imagery, is referencing her indigenous heritage. Her mother and grandmother are also clay artists. And so it speaks, to her heritage. It looks, I think a lot of people, when they walk in, think it's African.
Mm-hmm.
And it's near the Sanford Biggers, and it's near another piece that has African roots to it. And I love that about it, that this is something that can speak to more than one kind of person, more than one culture.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to know more about her Pueblo, you can learn about it, or you can take it in as it is.
Was it Santa Clara Pueblo?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful piece.
It is. And I'm really so grateful to have an institution and a group of people that support these efforts. Because I think as the hunter continues to evolve in the 21st century, more and more people will be interested in works like this. So,
yeah. Talking about the passage of time, you mentioned you've been at the Hunter 20 years now. Is there a way that you think differently about curating, putting shows together, archiving artists than you thought about that process 20 years ago?
That's a hard question. I'm more confident in my abilities because I'm old. And I've been here forever, and I know my community and I know my institution. Yeah. But I will say I am such an instinct-driven, emotional curator at the core of it. When an artwork or an artist speaks to me, I go to it. And so that has not shifted. I'm sure different things speak to me than they might have,
Maybe.
Yeah.
I like that. The vision has continuity, that you were you 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, if I didn't know Leslie's work and I saw it now, I would still want to curate a show of it. Mm-hmm. But it's, yeah, I think we all grow in different ways. So. How do you, I mean, you've seen The Hunter since you were little. How do you think it's grown and changed?
It's definitely changed by welcoming the modern world and something other than white men. That's different because when I was a girl, that's all there was. And like you, I didn't notice. I mean, at least I don't remember noticing. And I remember being a 16-year-old in art history, and it didn't really cross my mind that I was being served a 100% diet of the work of white men. I was just so thrilled to be focusing on what I loved and figuring things out and how they related to each other and how things were made. And so I don't know that I noticed it at the time, but when looking back, I can see that then I would know, oh, this is something new, and it's somebody different, and then I'm privileged to have been able to see the new additions come in, and that's really fun. And I really loved the changing exhibitions. They're all so wildly different, like the science fiction oriented exhibition, and then the F word.
Melissa loved the F word because she was in the F word.
But
right?
I also love the spicy title.
Yeah, the spicy title. The F word, we mean female, was a traveling exhibition we did in 2020, 21. We didn't know, obviously, that COVID was going to happen, but it was aligned with the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage and to highlight women in our collection. And it traveled to a couple of places, and I think a new iteration of it will travel in the future.
I hope so, post-COVID, so it gets its due, right?
And we have more artists now in the collection than we did 4 years ago, and can highlight and send out on the road. And I think museums right now, thankfully, are wanting to highlight women artists in their collection and other collections. So, yeah.
Well, this has been so much fun, and I see that we're kind of coming to the end of our time. Is it time for our last question, Nina?
I was actually going to squeeze in one more before, if I may. And, just something that's also on my mind. What would you like to say to early career artists embarking on their path to being artists and looking to be collected?
For artists?
Yeah.
Well, I think for artists, you have to always kind of try and be true to whatever you're feeling inside and make it. If your work is experimental, it's experimental. There's going to be somebody out there who appreciates it. As far as wanting your work in a museum or to be collected, you have to keep doing it and keep trying to show it locally and at whatever way you can and putting it out there. And if it's consistent, if it's strong, if it speaks to people other than yourself, hopefully, someone will catch on and it'll get there. It just takes time,
Well, as with everything in life, persistence and tenacity, right?
Yes. And if you want to be collected by a particular place, you might look at what they're focused on and see if you fit there. For example, Melissa was visiting an institution yesterday that was focused on one family's type of artwork. Well, it wouldn't make sense for someone who wasn't in that family to be sending their work there for consideration. So, look at where you're connecting with to make sure that that's what they want to.
Find the lid for your pot, so to speak.
Yes.
Or the other way around. All right, now I'm ready for the final question, Melissa.
All right. The final question, which is becoming our traditional signature final question. Okay. What are 2 to 4 things that you have hanging in your own home that you really love?
I have a work by Melissa Hefferlin. 2 or 3 things that I really love.
Mm-hmm.
See, now this I should have paid more attention to what the last question was in the other podcast. I do have a small work by Leslie Dill that I absolutely love. It is a series of like prayer flags. You guys know what prayer flags are? They're
The Tibetan
man.
Yeah.
A man and his lips are sealed and it says voice on it. So it's about not having a voice or trying to find one, which I think is very poetic.
Having a proxy voice. Or like a proxy voice. Voice is silenced and there's something else.
I have a work by an artist named Andy Seftel.
I love that one.
Who is a Tennessee artist. Well, he's from California, but he's Tennessee now. He's been here a long time, and he does a lot of abstract, very brightly colored oil on woods that speak to the environment and all kinds of like personal things to him. He puts letter writing into his. It's like collage based. I love collage based works. As somebody who's an immigrant, I think I really like the mixing of cultures. So, and then my other favorites are actually from travel. So they are things from India or Egypt or Europe, just little things I've picked up as I've traveled that remind me of those places.
I love to do that too.
Yeah, that's always fun. Yeah. I have some beautiful Indian stuff in my home in Switzerland, which I cherish. Because then it's not only just beautiful art, it's also the memory of the travel and the smells and all the senses that were there. So, yeah.
And I was teasing, but Melissa and Dowd, her husband, both painted me a camel from India that I really adore, my little camel. And both those paintings are among my favorites because they're hanging right next to my bed and I look at them all the time.
Thank you for saying that.
Oh, so you have a camel each. I love that idea.
Yes. They both did it. I'm waiting for her son's camel now.
I was just going to say the third one in that group. Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I feel we could have gone on for quite a bit longer, but we are coming to the end of this, unfortunately.
I learned a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I certainly did because I'm just sort of starting to enter this world. So for me, this is all very new and very exciting. Thank you for spending your time with us and for being so generous with all the information and just sort of understanding and getting a glimpse into your work is just so absolutely fascinating. So thank you very much. And thank you, Melissa, as always, for being here and guiding all of this. And to our viewers, thank you also for spending your time with us. And we have a new edition of An Artful Life coming the next first Tuesday of the month. And we'll have another fantastic guest. So please stay tuned. And wish you all a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nina.
Bye-bye.